The quiet that came before time. The night has settled, soft and deep. The wind outside moves slowly, brushing against the window like a gentle memory. In this stillness, the world grows small and far away. You breathe in and out, and the air feels calm, almost ancient. Somewhere between the ticking seconds and the hum of silence, old stories begin to stir. Not loudly, not urgently, but like whispers rising from forgotten pages. They have no need to prove anything. They exist only to drift beside you, to carry your thoughts farther from the noise of waking life. Here, there are no worries, no tomorrow. Only the quiet pulse of the past, steady and timeless like a heartbeat beneath the floor of history. Let your eyes grow heavy as the shadows lengthen. The night will hold you. Let your mind step lightly into that still river where centuries slide by without sound, where empires and names dissolve into gentle echoes. What remains is peace, a space between moments, a hush where time breathes softly. And in that hush you will sleep, carried by the calm weight of ages, safe inside the rhythm of the dark. History is not made only of battles or crowns. It is the quiet pulse of ordinary lives, the soft trace of footsteps that time forgot. Tonight, we will walk through 4 stories, not to awaken them, but to listen as they rest. We'll meet those who once held power, whose voices now fade like smoke at dawn. We'll wander through a hanging garden where green leaves once grew against the desert wind. We'll follow the journey of coins and paper, tiny symbols of trust that crossed the hands of millions. And at last, we'll stand before an ancient city of stone, its towers long fallen, its silence complete. Each story is a breath, each moment a wave fading against the shore of memory. Let them pass slowly. Let them guide you deeper into stillness. For tonight, the past is gentle and it asks nothing of you but rest. The Throne and Time. The young one on the throne. Once, in a kingdom that no longer bears a name, there was a boy who became a ruler before he truly learned what ruling meant. He was still soft with youth, his hands more used to music than to the weight of command. The crown was cool and heavy on his brow, and the court whispered around him like leaves stirred by a wind he could not see. He liked the light, the laughter, the evenings filled with sound. The marble halls echoed with stringed instruments, and candles burned until dawn painted them to smoke. He would walk among dancers and forget the duties waiting behind the closed doors of council rooms. Outside, the city glowed in rhythm with his delight, a brief summer of color and song. Time, however, does not move to the tune of celebration. It drifts quietly, steady as tide over stone. The feasts grew slower, the music thinner, the courtyards empty one by one. The young ruler would sit beside a window looking out across rooftops gone pale in the morning haze. He would lift his cup and hear only the hollow note of its rim. Still there was no tragedy, no fall from grace, only the gentle turning of seasons. The joy of youth became the stillness of reflection. The noise faded into quiet, and the quiet became his companion. The city slept beneath him, its walls breathing in and out with the calm of a living thing. The boy who had once filled it with music now listened to its silence and found it soft, almost kind. The people went on with their lives, the sky changed colors, as it always had. In that quiet, he discovered something simple, that power, when left alone, becomes peace. He no longer reached for it, he merely watched it rest beside him, harmless, and still. And so the young one on the throne grew older without noticing. The candles burned lower, the halls cooled, and the world settled into the rhythm of night. Somewhere beyond the palace, a breeze carried the faint scent of rain. It entered through the open window, touched his face, and lingered there, like a blessing, like a lullaby. The kingdom breathed, the stars moved, and the ruler slept while history exhaled softly into the dark. Gold and the throne. There was once a man who held a throne not because he sought greatness, but because it had simply been placed beneath him. The hall was bright, its floor polished like still water, and when he looked down he could see his own reflection staring back. A reflection both familiar and distant, like someone he might have been in another life. He did not crave conquest, nor did he hunger for glory. What caught his gaze instead was the quiet shimmer of gold, coins, chalices, bracelets, sunlight glancing across the metal that filled his chambers. Gold was constant. It asked for nothing. It gave back only light. Power, in comparison, seemed loud and restless, always demanding, never satisfied. So one day he made a choice that would echo softly through the centuries. He traded his crown for gold, not in anger, not in despair, but in a calm moment, as though he were exchanging one melody for another. The courtiers whispered, confused. The city outside went on breathing, unchanged. For a time he lived simply, surrounded by the color that had once decorated his palace. The gold gleamed, but it made no promises. It was warm when touched by the sun, cool when the night arrived. He thought of the throne sometimes, not with longing, but with the same stillness one feels when remembering a dream already fading with morning. Yet time is a patient river. The man returned years later, drawn not by desire, but by the gentle pull of familiarity. The throne waited as it always had, quiet and untouched. He sat once more, feeling its shape beneath him. It was neither victory nor defeat, only a circle completing itself. He understood then that neither the crown nor the coins had truly belonged to him. They were simply reflections of passing seasons, tools through which the world measured its glimmers of importance. He smiled, and the hall seemed to exhale, light shifting like water on stone. The gold was still gold, the throne was still a seat. And the man, older now, rested between them, no longer choosing, no longer needing to. Outside, the wind moved softly through the courtyards, carrying no judgment, only the whisper of peace. The world continued, and he, finally, slept. Feasts and family. There was once a ruler whose heart belonged more to his family than to the realm he governed. He looked at the faces of his kin and saw the story of his own blood written there, brothers, sisters, cousins, all bound by the warmth of shared memory. To him, the walls of the palace were not a fortress but a home, filled with laughter and the smell of meals prepared for those he loved. He wanted them close. He raised them higher, granting each a place beside him, building a small kingdom within the great one. Their voices filled the corridors. Their children's steps echoed in the marble halls. For a while, the palace glowed with a kind of living light. The days felt long and golden, each sunrise arriving like a blessing over the rooftops. But time has a quiet patience. It waits behind every celebration, behind every song. One by one, the feasts ended, the tables cleared, and the music slipped into memory. The ruler watched the candles burn shorter each evening, until their scent became the only trace of the gathering that once was. The halls, so full of laughter, began to listen instead of speak. He would walk through them in the cool of morning, fingers brushing the stone. The echoes followed him gently, echoes of his family's voices, of soft conversations, of love unmeasured. Yet even love fades into stillness when life moves forward. The sons went their ways. The daughters built homes of their own. The great rooms stood quiet, lined with portraits and dust. He did not grieve. There was no loss, only change. What had been noise was now peace. What had been celebration was now memory. He sat sometimes in the courtyard, beneath the same sun, watching petals fall from the old trees. The air carried faint laughter from some distant street, and he smiled. Everything he had built remained, only softer, gentler, less alive but more eternal. The palace breathed, slow and steady. The ruler closed his eyes and felt the calm settle over him like silk. All that remained were walls, shadows, and time, and within them the warmth that never truly left. The feast was over, but the quiet that followed was sweeter still. The stern one. In a land where mornings rose pale and slow, there once lived a ruler whose heart had grown still long before his reign began. He had been shaped by rules, by order, by the crisp edges of command. Those around him said his eyes were clear and cold, not cruel but distant, like a winter sky that promises no warmth, yet no storm either. He trusted in structure more than sentiment. Where others saw friendship, he saw duty. Where others saw favor, he saw weakness. He believed that kindness could blur the line between right and wrong, so he held fast to law, to the certainty of numbers and decrees. Those who had once stood beside him, old friends, mentors, loyal hands, found themselves slowly fading into the background, replaced by the quiet machinery of his governance. The palace grew silent, its grand chambers filled with the soft sound of parchment, the steady scratch of ink, the turning of pages. Even the gardens outside seemed to grow in even rows, pruned to perfection, nothing out of place. He would walk among them sometimes, hands clasped behind his back, his thoughts moving in measured steps, like soldiers on parade. And yet beneath that surface of control, time worked its quiet spell. The ruler's days grew longer, his voice softer. He began to notice the faint echoes his decisions left behind, a hall less visited, a feast less attended, a city that whispered instead of sang. He never complained. He only nodded to the stillness, as if it were a companion he had expected all along. When his reign finally came to an end, no rebellion rose, no mourning cry was heard. The world simply continued, calm and precise, as he had always intended. The statues of his likeness stood tall in the squares, their faces unfeeling, carved in his image. Seasons drifted past them without pause, and though his name remained in the records, it became more sound than story, more echo than memory. The silence he left behind stretched across the centuries, even and unbroken. Not a silence of fear nor of grief, just the quiet order he had always sought. Somewhere, far beyond time's reach, perhaps he still walks among perfect rows of trees, their shadows straight, their leaves unmoving. And there, at last, he rests. When power fades. In the slow rhythm of ages, rulers came and rulers went. Each arrived with the same quiet certainty that the world would remember their touch, that their names would outlast the rise and fall of seasons. For a while, it always seemed true. The palace gates swung open, banners fluttered, voices lifted like waves beneath a bright sky. But time, patient and gentle, moved through it all, smoothing every line, softening every sound. The throne was never empty for long. One man stood, then another still. Their robes changed color, their symbols shifted, but the seat itself remained the same, unchanging, unmoved, waiting with the stillness of stone. They spoke of legacies, of destiny, of eternity. Yet even as they spoke, dust gathered in corners, candles burned low, and the air of the chamber held the faint scent of things already passing. Power was a tide, never a possession. It rose to touch the shore, shining and loud, then slipped away again, leaving only damp footprints in its wake. Some tried to hold it tighter, as though strength could still the sea, but the harder they grasped, the faster it flowed through their fingers. Others let it go willingly, content to watch it fade into distance, its glow dimming to something almost tender. Outside the palace walls, the world remained the same. Children played, merchants bartered, the wind carried the scent of bread and rain. Life continued, unaware of the quiet exchange of crowns above it. The sun set over roofs of gold and straw alike, and in that light, all things were equal. Eventually, the memory of each ruler softened, their voices blending into one long hum, too gentle to divide. Their deeds became stories. Their stories became whispers. Their whispers became sleep. And in that sleep, the world found peace again. The throne endured, polished smooth by centuries of hands. It watched the turning of generations with neither pride nor sorrow. Only time stayed, silent and eternal, breathing softly through the corridors of power long abandoned. Power, once fierce, had melted into stillness. And in that stillness nothing was lost, only transformed into quiet. The air held it, the stone remembered it, and the night kept it safe. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The garden beneath the desert sun. Far across the dry expanse, where the horizon shimmered and the air itself seemed to hum with heat, there was once said to be a garden. No one could say for certain when it was made or who first dreamed it into being, but the stories spoke of terraces rising gently from the dust, one above another, each alive with green. There, in a place where the earth was meant to crack and crumble, life unfurled instead, soft, patient, impossibly tender. The sun poured over the garden like gold, and the leaves drank it in. Water whispered down narrow channels of carved stone, winding its way through roots and moss, over petals that glistened as though each drop were a jewel. From afar, travelers said it looked like a mirage, but those who stepped closer swore they could feel the cool breath of shade before they ever saw the first tree. It was a place that refused to belong to its surroundings, a quiet rebellion made of green and water and time. Some believed the garden was a gift, others said it was an act of longing. Perhaps someone somewhere loved deeply enough to summon beauty out of dust. Perhaps it was built not from stone or soil, but from the desire to soften the world. Whatever the truth, the air there was different, heavier, yet kind. It carried the scent of growing things and the slow rhythm of falling water. When evening came, the desert cooled, and the colors deepened. Shadows stretched across the terraces, and the last light turned the leaves to silver. Birds gathered among the branches, their songs gentle, unhurried. In that hush between day and night, the garden seemed to breathe with the earth itself. No one knew how long it lasted. Some said centuries. Others thought it vanished the moment it was named. But the story remained, carried across generations like a lullaby. Even now, when the wind moves through the dunes, it sounds a little like running water. If you listen closely, you might almost hear it, the faint, steady heartbeat of a place that was never meant to exist, and yet somehow did. And beneath the vast desert sky, the dream of that garden still sleeps, cool and eternal. The mystery without a map. No one truly knows where the garden was. Its story lingers in the folds of old manuscripts and the corners of forgotten tongues, yet when you search for it, there is nothing, no map, no stone, no trace of roots in the ground. Only words passed from one dreaming mind to another. Perhaps that is all the proof it ever needed. Some say it stood beside the river, shimmering beneath a moon that has long since dimmed. Others imagine it hidden within the dunes, a secret oasis visible only at dawn when the air is cool and the light too soft to doubt. And there are those who believe it never existed at all, that it was only a mirage of hope, a place imagined by weary travelers who longed for shade. The scholars searched. They brushed the sands aside, lifted fragments of clay, traced faint lines carved by forgotten hands. Still the earth gave them silence. Each discovery led to another question, and every question dissolved like mist under the morning sun. Perhaps the garden was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was born only in the minds of those who needed it most. Those who looked out across the endless plain and felt the ache of emptiness, who dreamed of green life rising where there should have been none. A dream can live longer than any monument. It does not crumble, it does not erode. It passes quietly between generations, surviving by whisper and wonder alone. When night falls and the desert cools, the stars turn their slow gaze downward. They light the sand until it glows faintly, as if something beneath it is breathing still. If you listen, you might imagine the trickle of water, the faint rustle of unseen leaves. Maybe that sound comes from the wind, or maybe it is the garden remembering itself. The truth doesn't matter anymore. The mystery is its own kind of beauty, an echo that soothes rather than asks to be solved. And in that uncertainty lies peace, the kind that lets the mind drift softly towards sleep. For some places are meant not to be found, but simply believed in. Quiet, eternal, and gently imagined. The Whisper of Nineveh. There are those who say the garden never belonged to Babylon at all. They say it rose instead from the heart of another ancient city, Nineveh, a place of stone and wind and stories layered as deep as time itself. Here, the air was heavy with dust and memory, and yet it is said that water once ran through its veins, gentle as breath, guided by hands that understood both beauty and necessity. Nineveh stood along the slow curve of the Tigris River. The city shimmered in the desert light, its walls stretching high, carved with patterns of lions, wings, and eyes that watched from ages past. And somewhere within those walls, the tale tells, a king built terraces that rose toward the sun, steps of green cut into the earth, alive with vines and shade, They say the stone was cool beneath the feet, and the air smelled faintly of wet clay and blooming leaves. The king had ordered water to flow upward against the will of gravity through clever wheels and hidden channels. He wanted the earth to sing again, and it did. It must have been quiet there, in the way only a perfect place can be quiet. The sound of water slipping over carved stone, the soft creak of wooden wheels turning slow, the murmur of leaves as they brushed one another in the afternoon heat. From a distance, the terraces must have looked like a wave caught in motion, frozen halfway between land and sky. Each level reflected the sunlight differently. Gold at morning, silver at dusk, deep emerald beneath the moon. Travelers came from far away, drawn not by conquest or trade, but by curiosity. They wrote of the city's walls, of its gates of bronze, of the miracle of a garden that breathed in a place meant only for sand. Their words became the roots of the legend, winding outward across continents and centuries. And in time, people forgot the king's name, but they remembered the feeling of awe that lingered in the telling. Scholars in later ages searched the ruins of Nineveh for proof. They found carvings of palms and cypress trees, canals and water wheels, etched into clay tablets hardened by centuries of sleep. They found signs of gardens fed by hidden aqueducts, of engineers who could coax rivers to climb. Perhaps this was the truth. Perhaps the hanging gardens were not in Babylon, but here, a gift of the Assyrian heart, mistakenly attributed to another crown. Yet what is truth when seen through the haze of time? A story told long enough becomes a kind of dream. Dreams do not need directions or names, they need only the space to exist in the quiet of the mind.
And so the Garden of Nineveh became both real and unreal, both memory and mirage.
Its terraces still rise somewhere in the imagination, watered by belief instead of rivers. When the sun sets over what remains of Nineveh, the stones catch a faint shimmer, like a memory trying to return. The Tigris still moves beyond the ruins, slow and endless, carrying fragments of the past in its current. If you stand there long enough, you might hear the hum of invisible water wheels turning still, gentle and patient as sleep itself. The king who built it is gone, his crown turned to dust. But his desire to bring life to what should have been barren remains. It lingers in every green thing that grows against its odds, in every quiet act of creation that refuses despair. The scholars can argue, the ruins can crumble, the sands can shift, but somewhere beyond time's reach, the Garden of Nineveh breathes, and if you close your eyes and listen to the slow rhythm of your own heartbeat, you might feel it.
That steady turning, that endless flow, that soft and secret miracle that never truly vanished.
It lives now where all lost wonders go.
In the space between dreaming and remembering,
In the still place beneath the dark,
where even the desert sleeps in green. The garden within.
Whether it was ever real or only dreamed, the story of the garden has never stopped breathing. It lingers not in the soil or stone, but in the quiet corners of the human heart. That secret place where imagination plants its own seeds. For some, it is only legend, a story to pass the time. For others, it is proof that beauty can exist anywhere, even in the midst of desolation. Across centuries, when the world feels dry and the air heavy, the thought of the hanging garden returns. It comes softly, like a cool breeze brushing through the mind. You can almost hear the water again, falling in small silver threads, touching the leaves that never wither. It is not a place that must be found, it is a feeling that must be remembered. In this way, the garden has become more than a memory of stone and root. It is a symbol of tenderness, a quiet defiance against emptiness.
Every act of kindness, every patient creation, every small thing we nurture out of care. These are its true vines, reaching outward, blooming silently in all directions.
The miracle was never the walls or the terraces. It was the will to create them in a world that said nothing could grow. Somewhere, within everyone, there is a patch of soil that still waits for water. It waits for the soft touch of attention, for the decision to make something gentle out of something harsh. When we think of the hanging garden, we are really thinking of that space inside ourselves,
The one that chooses to imagine life, even in the shadow of loss.
Artists have painted it, poets have dreamed it, travelers have searched for it. None have truly found it, and yet all have touched a part of it in their own way. Because the garden no longer belongs to a single place or time. It belongs to the quiet persistence of love and to the endless curiosity of the human spirit. Even now, when cities rise from steel and glass, when deserts stretch wider and wilder, people still carry within them the wish for something green, something soft, something alive. Perhaps that is why the story endures.
It asks for nothing.
It promises nothing.
It only reminds us that beauty, once imagined, never fully disappears.
It hides in every act of gentleness, in every leaf that grows when no one expects it, in the silent work of hands that build, mend, and hope. And at night, when the world falls quiet, you can almost feel it stirring beneath your chest. The garden within, vast and forgiving, unshaken by time or distance. Its waters are calm and endless. Its air is cool and still. It needs no proof to exist. It simply waits, patient and eternal, for you to close your eyes and remember it. For the true hanging garden was never meant to stand against the sky. It was meant to bloom in the mind, to remind every wanderer and every dreamer that even in the driest deserts of life, something green, something gentle, something enduring can still grow. The journey of money, the age of trade and trust. In the beginning, before coins and ledgers, before the glint of metal or the rustle of paper, there was only the simple rhythm of exchange. One person held grain in their hands, another held salt. They met beneath an open sky, and without words, they traded. A handful for a handful, need for need. The world was still young then, and every trade was a promise, unspoken but understood. Trust was the first currency. It shimmered quietly between strangers, fragile and precious. When one offered what they had, they were not just giving an object. They were giving a piece of faith, a silent belief that fairness would be returned. Each exchange was like a thread spun between lives, weaving a small web of connection in the vastness of the world. There were no markets yet, only meeting places, the bend of a river, the shadow of a tree, the edge of a village. People brought what the earth had given them: grain, shells, hides, honey, metal from the mountains, and the soft shimmer of silk. Every object held the story of hands that made it, of time spent shaping and gathering. When they traded, they were not just moving goods, but passing stories, passing effort, passing trust. It was slow, but it was peaceful. The clinking of goods replaced the noise of conquest. The language of need was simple and kind. You have this, I have that, let us share.
And under that quiet agreement, humanity learned to understand value, not as a number, but as a feeling.
Of course, not all trades were equal. Sometimes one offered too much, sometimes too little, but still the system held because what bound it together was not law, but belief. It was belief that the world could balance itself through patience and honesty. And even when mistakes were made, they were forgiven, like ripples fading on the surface of a lake. Seashells gleamed like small treasures in the sun, traded for food or cloth. Salt, the taste of the ocean, became wealth itself. Cacao beans, iron, amber, feathers, each thing found its place in the delicate dance of giving and receiving. And as the years drifted by, the exchanges grew larger, the distances longer, but the principle stayed the same. To trade was to trust. To offer was to believe in another's good heart. When night fell and the markets emptied, the quiet of the earth returned. Families sat beside their fires, counting not coins but blessings. What they had gained was not just sustenance but connection, proof that even in a vast, uncertain world, two people could meet and understand each other without words. Before gold, before power, before the hunger for more, there was that gentle balance. Hands meeting hands, eyes meeting eyes. And somewhere deep in that first exchange, in that slow rhythm of giving and receiving, humanity planted the seed of something greater. It was the beginning of value, the birth of trust, and like the earliest dawn, it rose quietly, warming the edges of a still, sleeping world. The first shine of metal. Long after the days of barter, when people had grown weary of carrying grain for salt or shells for cloth, there came a quiet transformation. It began in Lydia, a small kingdom where the rivers ran clear and the mountains whispered of hidden riches. In that place, the earth itself offered a new language, metal, gleaming beneath the soil, heavy in the hand, light in the mind. The first coins were small, simple circles pressed from electrum, a natural blend of gold and silver. They fit neatly between the fingers, smooth and cool to the touch. No two were quite the same, and yet each carried something powerful, a promise. Not a spoken promise, not even one written down, but a silent understanding between strangers, that this small, shining piece could hold the same worth wherever it went. In the markets of Lydia, traders began to use them cautiously. At first, there was hesitation. Could something so small truly replace the comfort of grain sacks or bolts of silk? But when the first trade was made, a glimmer of metal for a measure of wine, something shifted. The exchange was effortless, almost graceful. The coins slipped from one hand to another, and in that moment, value took shape in a new way. The merchant smiled. The sound of clinking metal replaced the murmur of long negotiations. Each coin carried weight, but also freedom. Now a merchant could travel lighter, trade faster, move farther. The coin was not just metal, it was trust, cast into form, faith given a body. Under the sun, the coins glowed like tiny mirrors, catching the light and throwing it back across the stalls. The people began to see them not as objects, but as symbols, round as the moon, bright as dawn. They could cross borders, speak languages no tongue could master. A Lydian coin could find its way to distant lands, and there a stranger would still understand its worth. From the hands of miners to the forges of craftsmen, from the dusty markets of Lydia to the harbors of Greece and beyond, the coins traveled endlessly. Each one bore the faint mark of its origin, the stamp of a lion, the curve of a king's seal. Yet once it left the mint, It belonged to everyone. It was no longer a token of a place, but of an idea. That value could be shared without knowing its maker. Night would fall, and the markets would sleep, but even in the dark, the coins held their quiet gleam. They did not rust, they did not fade. They waited patient for the next morning's trade, for another pair of hands to carry them onward. And so, with each exchange, humanity learned a softer rhythm of trust. The coin was never the treasure, it was the pause between giving and receiving, the shimmer of belief made visible. Its glow was not of wealth, but of connection. The moment two people met and silently agreed on what was fair. In that glow, the world found a common language, a song made not of words, but of light. And beneath the same sky, in every market and every age, that quiet song still plays. The weightless promise. In the distant east, where rivers curved like silk and cities shimmered beneath lantern light, a quiet miracle was born, a kind of value that no longer needed to shine. It did not gleam like gold or clink like metal. It whispered instead, light as air, soft as a leaf. Paper. The first notes were simple, printed on thin sheets, brushed with ink, and sealed with care. They carried no metal, no weight, only belief. Each mark upon the surface stood in place of treasure that might never be seen, and yet, in the minds of those who held it, the worth was real. People began to realize that trust itself could be folded, written, and passed from hand to hand. It began modestly in the markets of China when merchants and travelers grew tired of heavy coins. Their caravans stretched across deserts and mountains, burdened not by distance, but by weight. And so someone somewhere asked a simple question: what if value could travel without metal, without burden? What if it could float? The first paper notes carried the names of merchants or seals of the empire, soft symbols of confidence. A sheet of paper became a bridge between two strangers. It held no gold, yet the heart accepted it because belief is lighter than metal and far more enduring. When the wind passed through the stalls of the markets, the notes fluttered softly, like tiny birds, each carrying the quiet hum of trust. At night, under the glow of oil lamps, scholars and traders would hold the notes up to the light, tracing the patterns pressed upon them. They could feel the pulse of something new. An invisible kind of wealth, one that existed not in what you touched, but in what you imagined. The world, for the first time, was learning to believe in the unseen. From the rivers of China to the ports of Arabia, the idea drifted slowly outward. It crossed oceans, deserts, mountains, not as a possession, but as a thought. In time, every land would take it up in their own way, each giving shape to this gentle idea that worth could rest in faith alone. The beauty of it was quiet. No noise of metal, no burden of weight, only a soft exchange, one hand to another, as light as a sigh. The sound of paper folding replaced the ring of coin. A new music, tender and calm. Even the air around it seemed to breathe differently, as if the world itself had learned to move with more ease. Paper could be torn, burned, lost, and yet even then the idea behind it lived on, waiting to take shape again, waiting to be written anew. Because once trust is born, it does not vanish. It only changes form. In that shift from gold to ink, from heavy to weightless, humanity learned something eternal. That true value is never in the thing itself, but in the quiet promise we share. And as night fell across the sleeping markets of the East, Those delicate notes fluttered gently in the breeze. Light as dreams, soft as time, and just as endless. The Book of Numbers and Trust. There came a time when gold no longer needed to gleam and paper no longer needed to pass from hand to hand. The world had grown more intricate, more thoughtful. People began to realize that wealth could exist in memory, in marks, in names, in numbers. And so the books appeared. They were quiet things bound in leather, heavy with care. Inside, rows of ink traced across pale pages like the lines of a map, guiding invisible rivers of value from one place to another. A merchant would walk into a hall, place his trust upon a desk, and walk out lighter than when he came. No coins clinked, no paper fluttered, only a name written carefully by candlelight and a signature drawn beneath it. This was the birth of the banker, the keeper of trust, the scribe of invisible fortunes. He held not the gold itself, but the belief in its existence.
Behind him, vaults slept cool and dark, their silence filled with unseen weight.
But the true treasure lay in the book before him, a landscape of digits and ink where entire kingdoms moved quietly across the page. Each number was a story, a promise, given form, a thread connecting one soul to another. One person lent, another borrowed, and between them, a single line of writing carried the balance. Faith no longer needed to shine or flutter. It could rest in the curve of a pen stroke, as still and strong as time itself. Outside, life continued. The sound of carriages, the calls of vendors, the hush of evening bells, all went on as before. Yet beneath it all an unseen current flowed, the pulse of exchange recorded by human hands. Gold slept deep in its chambers, untouched, while ink did the moving, the breathing, the living. There was comfort in this new order. The books did not age quickly, and their pages could hold years of quiet patience. A person might grow old, and still their name would remain, written beside numbers that had outlived their own heartbeat. The ink became a form of remembrance, a proof that something once passed between two hearts, measured not in weight, but in trust. And so the world learned again to believe in what could not be seen. The pen replaced the coin. The seal replaced the handshake. A ledger became a mirror of the human spirit. Careful, deliberate, always seeking balance. At night, when the banking halls grew empty, the books would rest in stillness. Their pages held the faint scent of paper and candle smoke, the ghost of countless transactions whispered into being. Somewhere beyond the walls, cities slept, unaware that their lifeblood, value, trust, connection, was breathing softly in those lines of ink. No gold glimmered in the dark, no paper rustled in the breeze. Only the calm weight of numbers remained, holding the world together with quiet precision. And so it was that trust, once carried in hands, once cast in metal and drawn on paper, found its truest form, not in what could be touched, but in what was written and remembered. In the hush of those ledgers, the world learned to rest, calm, certain, and softly balanced. The invisible currency. In time, the world grew faster. The streets filled with light, voices traveled through wires, and the sound of coins slowly faded into memory. The heavy weight of metal was gone, the crisp touch of paper softened into history. What remained was invisible, lines of code, pulses of energy, numbers dancing through quiet circuits of light. Money no longer lived in pockets or purses. It moved through unseen paths, flowing as silently as breath between people who might never meet. A card, a tap, a gentle flick of the hand. And with that, value crossed oceans in a heartbeat. No caravans, no gold chests, no handwritten ledgers. Only a signal, soft and instant. The world had found a new rhythm, light as air, constant as the pulse beneath the skin. The first plastic cards seemed simple enough. Small, smooth, weightless things. They carried no sound, no shine, but inside them lived the same ancient promise. With one swipe, one touch, doors opened, journeys began, debts were settled, dreams quietly funded. They were not really objects, but keys to invisible rooms, rooms made of trust and memory. Then came the transfer. Silent, digital, unbound by distance. Numbers slipped between screens like raindrops through air. You could send something of yourself across the world and receive something back, all within the breath of a second. It was a magic born not of alchemy, but of connection, a modern whisper of the old trade by firelight. And soon after came the newest form, money without metal, without paper, without borders. It had no scent, no weight, no sound when dropped. It glowed only in screens and in minds. Some called it digital, some called it virtual, but it was still the same dream, a shared belief that what passes between hands or codes or hearts carries meaning because we choose to trust it. People once feared that something had been lost, that without the feel of a coin or the mark of a signature, the world might forget what value meant. But even now, beneath the hum of networks and the quiet flicker of data, the essence remains unchanged. It is still belief that moves the world. The same belief that once traded grain for salt or gold for promise now travels through the invisible threads of technology. Different tools, same heartbeat. In quiet rooms lit by screens, someone pays a bill, another sends a gift, another helps a stranger far away. No voices, no gestures, just signals moving like streams of light. Yet behind every one of those exchanges there is still a human pulse, a decision to give, to trust, to connect. And in that, the soul of money endures. Perhaps it has always been this way. Each age only changes the vessel, never the essence. Clay tablets became ledgers, ledgers became screens, and screens became nothing at all, just air and thought. But through all of it, value has remained a reflection of belief. A mirror of the human need to share, to balance, to belong. When night falls, the glow of the city hums softly. Invisible currents move through its veins, transfers, exchanges, gestures of trust. No one can see them, yet they hold the weight of all that once was. The old coins still glimmer faintly in memory. The paper still rustles somewhere in the mind. But above it all, flowing silently through the wires, through the spaces between us, is the oldest rhythm of all. It is not the sound of machines or numbers. It is the quiet echo of faith, the steady heartbeat of human connection, the endless whisper that says, "I believe in you." And beneath that whisper, the world rests, balanced, luminous, and softly alive. The city, beside the quiet sea. Along the soft curve of the Aegean shore, there once stood a city called Troy. Long ago its walls caught the first light of morning, turning gold beneath the rising sun. Ships drifted near its harbors, their sails white and slow, and voices echoed from the markets, carried gently on the salt wind. It was a living place, full of laughter, trade, and the small sounds of ordinary days. They say its walls were tall, built with care and pride, strong enough to guard both people and dreams. Inside, the streets wound like streams between houses of stone, and in the evenings the air shimmered with song. The sea would come close, brushing against the land like a lover's hand, whispering stories even as the city slept. It was a place of rhythm, of heartbeats and waves, of sunlight and shadow, and it felt as though it could never fade.
But time, gentle and endless, carries everything forward.
The voices grew softer, the walls gathered dust, and what was once filled with life became quiet. Still, the story of Troy did not die. It slipped into words, into memory, into the spaces between history and dream. Even now, the name glows faintly in the dark, not as a ruin, but as a remembrance. No one knows exactly when the story began. Perhaps it started with a song sung by a traveler who stood by the sea at dusk. Perhaps it was carried by the wind, passed from one shore to another. What remains certain is that Troy became more than a city. It became a mirror for all that humanity could feel: love, loss, pride, and longing. In the quiet of night, you can almost hear it still. The echo of steps on the ramparts, the soft murmur of waves beneath the walls. The wind moves through the ruins as if it remembers every name, every voice, every farewell. No battle cry remains, no clash of steel, only the calm breath of the sea reclaiming what was once its own. The people are gone, the fires are cold, and yet Troy endures, not in stone, but in the imagination. It lives wherever someone remembers a story, wherever a listener closes their eyes and sees the faint outline of towers against a dawn-colored sky. The city by the Aegean has long been quiet, but its silence is not sorrowful. It is the kind of silence that comes after a song has ended, the space where the final note still lingers, soft and golden, refusing to fade completely. And if you stand by the shore in that same light, with the waves at your feet and the wind in your hair, you might feel it. A gentle hum beneath the air, the memory of a city that once dreamed of eternity and found it not in stone, but in story. Troy sleeps now beneath layers of time, but her dream continues, as endless, as tender, and as peaceful as the sea itself.
The traces beneath the dust.
The years moved on, and the city that once gleamed by the Aegean faded into the earth. But beneath the soil, beneath the patient layers of time, something remained. It waited there quietly. Fragments of stone, the whisper of fire, the delicate skeleton of memory. When the archaeologists came, they brought with them careful hands and curious hearts. They brushed the ground gently, as if waking a sleeper from a long and tender dream. Beneath the dust, they found blackened stones, burned soil, and shards of pottery that still held the faint scent of smoke. It was as though the city had exhaled and never inhaled again. Some pieces were no larger than a coin, others heavy as a life once lived. Walls lay broken, their lines softened by centuries of wind. A single brick scarred by flame told more than any legend ever could. The earth had kept its secrets, but it had also kept its proof that something real had once stood here, that a story once had a heartbeat. The scholars knelt in silence. They traced the edges of stones, followed cracks that had not shifted in millennia. Each discovery felt like a breath returning to the world, a quiet pulse rising through the fingertips. The blackened ground beneath their feet was not just ruin. It was a kind of memory, an echo pressed deep into the bones of the earth. When the wind rose, it moved softly through the broken walls. It carried with it the scent of salt and distance, the same breath that once filled the sails of ships long gone. It touched the ruins the way water touches shore, with patience, with knowing. Even in ruin, there was gentleness. The archaeologists found more than evidence. They found traces of humanity, of fire and fear, of creation and collapse. A single bead, a broken spear, a piece of pottery painted by an unseen hand. All of it spoke of life, of effort, of someone once standing exactly where they now stood. And in that moment, the divide between past and present grew thin, almost transparent. The wind still blows through Troy. It hums softly across the hills, slips through gaps in the stone, and weaves around the edges of fallen walls. It sounds like breath, or like a song that forgot its words. If you listen closely, it might almost seem alive, a low, endless sigh that rises and falls with the rhythm of time. The archaeologists left when evening came.
The sight darkened, the air grew still.
But the ruins remained, quiet, proud, unbroken in their stillness. They did not speak of loss or glory, they only existed simple and eternal as proof that once people lived and dreamed and built. And so the story of Troy found its home not in triumph or tragedy, but in the calm endurance of stone. Even after centuries of silence, even after flame and time, something endures. Not the walls, not the crowns, but the memory, soft, persistent, and carried forever in the wind. The city sleeps now beneath the stars, its story folded gently into the earth. And the wind, forever patient, keeps watch, whispering to the stones, reminding them they are not forgotten. The reasons beneath the war. Perhaps the story of Troy, as the poet sang it, was not a song of beauty and heartbreak at all. Perhaps it was quieter, simpler, born not from passion, but from the pulse of trade and the endless rhythm of desire. For beneath every legend lies a world of ordinary reasons, and behind every great war, a whisper of something human, the wish to keep, to hold, to not lose what one already has. In those days, the sea was the road between worlds. Ships drifted across it like thoughts, carrying silk, bronze, olive oil, and dreams. The harbors of Troy stood where east met west, where the winds carried merchants from distant lands. It was a place of crossing, of exchange, a gate between nations. And gates, no matter how beautiful, always invite both wonder and envy. Perhaps that was why the armies gathered. Not for a face, not for love, but for control of the sea. For the narrow path where ships passed like veins through the body of the world. Whoever held that straight held the breath of commerce itself, and in that breath was power, as invisible and unyielding as the tide. The kings and warriors might have spoken of honor, of oaths of revenge, but the truth beneath the armor was simpler. Fear of loss, hunger for stability, the quiet ache of wanting more. For what is empire if not an attempt to preserve a fleeting moment of certainty? What is conquest if not the desire to silence change? And yet, even those who marched beneath banners and bronze helmets were, in the end, just people. They missed the scent of their homes, the softness of morning light through familiar windows. They did not dream of glory, they dreamed of returning. The war, perhaps, was only the noise that surrounded that dream. The chaos that rose when too many desires collided in the same space. In the evenings, when the fires dimmed and the sea grew dark, the soldiers might have heard the waves breaking against the shore and wondered if it was worth it. They might have seen the reflection of their torches trembling on the water and thought of everything that light could not reach. Even then, the stars would have shone the same, calm, indifferent, eternal. History remembers kings and battles, but it forgets the merchants whose ships never returned, the farmers whose fields grew silent, the children who listened to distant thunder and asked when it would end. It forgets that behind every empire stands the same fragile truth, that people only fight for what they fear to lose. And perhaps that is why the story of Troy lingers. Not because of love or betrayal, but because it reminds us that the reasons we give are never the whole of what we feel. Beneath every war, beneath every choice, lies a quiet thread of longing, to protect, to belong, to endure. Now the sea is calm again. Its waves erase the old footsteps, smoothing every scar of the past. No trace of ambition remains, only the whisper of wind over water, gentle, patient, and eternal. The ships are gone. The fire is gone, and all that remains is silence, soft as forgiveness, deep as sleep. The city that sleeps beneath the moon. Troy is silent now. The gates are gone, the fires long extinguished, and the voices that once filled its courtyards have dissolved into the night air. Yet the city remains, not alive, not gone, but resting, wrapped gently in the folds of time. The moon hangs above it like a guardian, pouring its pale light over broken stones and forgotten paths. And somewhere in the distance, the sea breathes softly, as if whispering the city's name to itself. There are no soldiers now, no merchants, no kings. Only the wind wanders freely through the ruins, tracing the outlines of walls that once stood tall. It moves with a tender patience, stirring the dry grass, lifting grains of sand from cracks in the stone. Each gust feels like a sigh, the earth remembering what it once carried. Every fallen column, every half-buried stair is a note in a song that only the wind still knows how to play. At night, the light of the moon turns the ruins silver. The stones gleam faintly as though something within them still glows. Perhaps it is memory. Or perhaps it is simply the way moonlight clings to all that endures. Shadows stretch gently across the ground, long and delicate, like the fingers of the past reaching toward the present. There is no sorrow here, only stillness. The quiet kind that comes after everything has already been said. The sea lies beyond, slow and endless. Its waves roll toward the shore, steady and sure, just as they did centuries ago. Once they carried ships filled with hope and ambition. Now they carry only reflection, the low hum of eternity passing over water. From the edge of the ruins, one might imagine those ships still out there, their sails faint ghosts beneath the stars. But they will never return, and the city no longer waits. In the silence of Troy, the air feels almost sacred, Owls call from the hills. The breeze threads through hollow windows, whispering to no one in particular. The ruins do not mourn. They rest. They have seen fire and glory, triumph and loss, and now they simply exist, neither proud nor broken, only still. It is a different kind of life, one beyond time's reach, where every stone is a heartbeat slowed to infinity. Travelers sometimes come to stand among the ruins. They walk quietly, their footsteps soft against the dust. Some bring flowers, others only silence. They pause, look around, and for a moment, they too seem part of the landscape, small, brief, and humbled by what endures.
They do not disturb the city's sleep.
They listen, and in that listening, they find something gentle, a peace that can only be born from acceptance. When the night deepens and the stars bloom across the dark, Troy seems almost to breathe again. The shadows sway, the wind hums through the broken gates, and the moonlight lays across the stones like a blanket. The city that once echoed with war now echoes only with calm. Time moves here as softly as dust falling through air. Nothing stirs that is not meant to. Nothing speaks that is not silence.
And still beneath the quiet there is life, not of bodies, but of memory.
Troy lives in the rhythm of the waves, in the curve of the moon above it, in the patience of the wind.
It sleeps, but it does not fade.
The sea keeps its watch at the stars keep their distance. And the city, ancient and eternal, dreams beneath them, its towers made of light and shadow, its heartbeat slow and steady as the tide,
its story carried gently onward,
forever resting, forever whole. The wise young king. The night unfolds like silk, soft and deep. A quiet moon hangs above the world, silver and patient, as if listening to something only the earth remembers. The wind moves lightly through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of rain and the hush of distant valleys. And somewhere, beneath that wide and dreaming sky, there was once a kingdom where peace lived not as a word, but as a rhythm, slow, steady, eternal. It was a gentle land of rivers and low hills, where lanterns glowed in the windows at dusk and children's laughter mingled with the hum of evening. In that land there ruled a young king, a boy who had inherited the throne before his voice had fully deepened, before his hands had learned the weight of command. But unlike the rulers who came before him, this one carried no hunger for conquest, no shadow of pride. He ruled instead with something quieter, a kind of listening. His name was Arian, and his crown was light. The people loved him not because he demanded it, but because his presence felt like morning light after long rain, calm, clear, and kind. When he spoke, his words were slow and thoughtful, as if he weighed every syllable on a scale invisible to all but him. When he smiled, it seemed the walls of the palace themselves sighed in relief. Arian had a way of seeing, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. He listened to the old men who spoke of drought, to the mothers who whispered fears for their children, to the wanderers who returned with stories from beyond the borders. He listened, and he remembered. And though his youth might have been an excuse for folly, he chose instead the quiet strength of understanding. Each morning, before the sun lifted its full weight across the sky, Arian would walk through the palace gardens. There, Among the vines and the scent of jasmine, he would pause to touch the leaves beaded with dew. The birds knew him and did not fly away. He would close his eyes, feel the warmth rising from the earth, and whisper to himself, "To rule is to listen. To listen is to love." It was a mantra passed down from his mother, who had died before he came of age. She had been known for her laughter, bright, unguarded, full of life. The people said that when she spoke, flowers opened faster, as if eager to hear her voice. Arion carried her memory not as grief, but as guidance, and so even in his solitude, he was never lonely. In his early years, the council doubted him. He was too young, too quiet, too gentle. But seasons turned, and the kingdom did not falter. Fields grew rich with grain, trade flowed easily through the harbors, and no banners of war disturbed the horizon. The people began to understand that wisdom did not always wear the face of age, and that kindness, when constant, could be stronger than any sword. At festivals, Arion would walk among the people without guards. He would eat their bread, drink their wine, and listen to their songs. When an old man once bowed too deeply, Arion lifted him up and said, "The ground is no place for love." It became a saying that lasted generations. Simple, beautiful, and true. The palace, once echoing with politics and pride, began to fill with laughter. Musicians returned to play in its marble halls. Poets found voices again. The Queen's old garden, which had been left to grow wild, was restored, and from its heart rose a tree unlike any other, silver-barked, with leaves that shone like coins in sunlight. People called it the Tree of Calm, for beneath it the king would often sit, reading or writing letters to distant lands. It was said that the breeze beneath that tree carried a strange magic. If one sat long enough, their worries would drift away like petals on a stream. Arion ruled for years this way, not through power, but through presence. His council learned to trust his silences, for they were never empty. When disputes arose between provinces, he would listen to each side until words turned to sighs and anger melted into understanding. He never raised his voice.
He never hurried a decision. He allowed time to do its quiet work.
The people grew gentle under his rule. Merchants greeted one another not as rivals, but as neighbors. Children played safely in the streets, and when the harvest came, entire villages gathered together beneath lanterns, sharing food until the stars blurred with laughter. There was a kind of holiness in the air, not of temples or priests, but of peace itself. Yet time, as always, moved forward. The young king grew older, though his heart remained soft. He began to notice the grey in his reflection, the slower steps of his mornings. And with that came a kind of deeper quiet, not sadness, but a gentle acceptance. He would stand on the balcony at night, watching the lamps flicker in the city below, and think, perhaps this is all the world ever needed, someone to love it as it is. One evening, a great storm swept over the land. Thunder rolled across the mountains like drums from another age, and the rain fell in silver sheets against the palace walls. Arion sat by the window, listening. When his servants came to light the lamps, he waved them away. "I want to hear it," he said softly. "The world speaking to itself." He watched the rain for hours. The gardens shimmered beneath lightning, and the great Tree of Calm swayed as though in slow conversation with the sky. It was in that storm that he made his last decree, that no monument should ever be built in his name. "Let the people remember me," he said, "not in stone, but in the way they speak to one another. Let kindness be my statue, and peace my throne. The storm passed before dawn. When the sun rose, it found the kingdom washed clean, the rivers full, the air sweet. The tree of calm glittered with droplets that caught the light like jewels. Arion stepped outside to walk among the gardens one last time. He touched the bark of the tree, smiled, and said, "You've done well." That night, the young king, though old by now, fell asleep beneath the same moon that had watched over him all his life. The palace was quiet, the air filled with the sound of crickets and the slow rustle of leaves. He closed his eyes, not with regret, but with gratitude, for he had seen his people live gently, love freely, and rest without fear, and that, he thought, was all a ruler could ever wish for. When morning came, the bells did not ring in mourning. Instead, they rang softly, slow, deliberate, like the rhythm of breath. The people gathered beneath the silver tree, not to weep, but to sit in silence. They said the air felt different that day, lighter, warmer, touched by something invisible, yet real. The kingdom did not crumble, it did not weep. It simply continued, as though the peace he had sown had taken root in every heart. Years passed, and still each dawn came quietly, as if carrying his spirit in the light. Children grew up hearing stories of the wise young king who had never raised his sword, who had built no monuments, who ruled not by fear, but by listening. And whenever a dispute rose in the markets, the elders would say, "Remember Arion, and let your words be soft." In time, the silver tree grew taller, its roots deep and unshakable. Travelers from distant lands would rest beneath its shade and speak of how the air seemed to hum with calm. Some said they could almost hear a heartbeat, slow, steady, as if the tree itself remembered its king. And as centuries passed, even when the kingdom's name faded from maps, the story endured. It traveled across borders, retold in whispers beside fires and in books bound in gold. Every version ended the same way, with the image of a young ruler sitting beneath a tree, eyes closed, listening to the wind and smiling as the world fell into peace. The night is quiet now. If you close your eyes, you can almost see him. The young king, the gentle light around him, the crown gleaming softly against his hair. The wind moves through the leaves above him like a lullaby, and the stars tilt forward to listen. He is not alone, he never was.
In the stillness, his story becomes more than memory.
It becomes breath, rhythm, rest. You can feel it if you listen closely. That calm pulse in the dark, steady and sure, like the slow beating of the heart. It's the same peace that fills your chest when you let go of worry, the same quiet that cradles the world when night deepens. Arion's peace is not just his own. It is the world's peace, waiting in every quiet moment, in every steady breath. And now it waits for you. Let your thoughts drift like lanterns across calm water. Let your shoulders loosen, your heartbeat slow. You are safe.
You are seen.
The kingdom rests, and so may you. Outside, the wind moves gently, brushing the world into stillness. The moon glows softly above, silver and kind. And somewhere, far beyond the edges of dream, a young king sits beneath a tree that never fades, smiling into eternity. Everything is calm. everything is whole. And the night, like his kingdom, sleeps in peace. Perfect sleep. The night has reached its quietest hour. It is the moment when time itself seems to pause, breathing softly, almost imperceptibly. Outside, the stars have dimmed to a slow shimmer, their light floating like distant embers over the sleeping earth. The air is still. So still that you can almost hear the rhythm of your own breath, steady and calm, rising and falling like the sea. The stories that once moved through your thoughts now drift into silence, their echoes dissolving gently into the dark. Babylon rests beneath the sand. Its gardens, once alive with green terraces and flowing water, have folded themselves back into the earth. No footsteps cross its paths anymore, no laughter stirs the leaves that once climbed toward the sun. Only dust and wind remain, moving in long, lazy circles, tracing invisible memories across the desert floor. And yet, even buried beneath centuries, the spirit of Babylon endures, not as a place, but as a whisper of creation, the dream of beauty built from nothing. It lies there, quiet and eternal, its stones dreaming in the warmth of the deep soil, the air above humming with the faint echo of water that no longer flows. Somewhere far from that ancient sand, the stories of trade and gold drift like smoke through time. The coins have stopped ringing, the paper no longer rustles. The ledgers sleep in their drawers, the numbers resting side by side in silent harmony. Money, that endless current of belief, has loosened its grip for the night. It floats like mist, weightless, passing through circuits and screens, through dreams and thoughts, circling the world in gentle silence. What began as shells and salt and silver has become something formless and infinite, a quiet trust carried on the breath of connection. It no longer clinks or shines, it simply is, moving through unseen rivers of light. And beyond those rivers, beyond the hum of the modern world, lies Troy. The city beneath the moon, resting beneath layers of earth and memory. Its towers have fallen into shadow, its walls softened by time, yet something remains, a pulse beneath the stone, a faint warmth in the ground. The sea still speaks to it in whispers, its waves brushing softly against the shore where the city once stood proud. In the moonlight, the ruins glow faintly, as if remembering the fires of long ago. They do not mourn, they do not hope. They only rest, for even history, fierce as it once was, must eventually close its eyes. All the noise has faded now. The drums of war, the chants of markets, the voices of kings and poets, all gone. What remains is the same rhythm that has always remained, the steady beat of the world itself, the quiet inhale and exhale of being alive. Every empire, every city, every story ends here, in this simple stillness. In the space between one breath and the next, everything returns to peace. Close your eyes. Let the images drift away. The hanging gardens, the silver coins, the ships upon the wine-dark sea. They are all still there, somewhere suspended in the great hush of memory, but they no longer call to you. They have done their part. Now they rest, and you may rest with them. The night folds around you like silk. It is warm, gentle, endless. The stars hang high above, patient and ancient, keeping quiet watch. Even the wind moves more softly now, tracing the faint outline of the world's stories before letting them fade. Every moment that was once bright with life now glows faintly in the distance, a constellation of memories scattered across the dark. Babylon breathes in sand, Nineveh hums beneath the dust. Lydia's coins lie silent in forgotten earth, the old markets sleep, their songs long stilled, and Troy, proud, patient Troy, drifts forever between sea and sky, its name floating through the ages like a lullaby. Each place has found its peace, its final rhythm, its slow surrender to time. And so too must you. For you are part of that same current, the endless movement of the world toward rest. You are a moment in its great breathing, a heartbeat in its eternal sleep. There is nothing to chase, nothing to solve, only the simple gift of stillness, unfolding around you like a soft tide.
Listen.
The night hums with quiet meaning. Every sound you hear, the faint rustle of air, the rhythm of your pulse, the subtle murmur of thought, is part of a greater harmony.
It is the song of rest, sung across centuries by cities, by empires, by hearts that once beat and now lie still.
It is the same song that calls you now. Let the breath come easier. Let the weight of time lift from your shoulders. Everything that once was, the gardens, the gold, the battles, the crowns, has already found its way home. There is nothing left to remember, nothing left to carry, only peace. And as you drift deeper into the dark, the stories close their pages, one by one. The words fade to quiet, the echoes dim, the night grows full. The wind softens, the world slows, and the heartbeat of history melts into the rhythm of your own. This is where all things rest, where the past becomes dream and dream becomes sleep. The night is whole again. The story is complete. And in this perfect stillness under stars that never tire, you too begin to fade, peaceful, unburdened, infinite, into the most gentle sleep of all. Close your eyes now. The night has grown soft and full, wrapping around you like warm silk. The stars are watching from far above, patient and kind, whispering nothing but peace. The world is quiet, the air is gentle, and every sound has slowed to calm. Let your thoughts drift like leaves upon a slow river. Let the day fall away, leaving only breath, only rest. You are safe within this stillness, held by the same hush that cradles the sleeping earth. Dreams are waiting, soft as moonlight, tender as rain. Let them find you, let them carry you. Sleep deeply now, with the peace of kings and the calm of stars. Good night, gentle heart.